down. What, Paco? Are you joining us? I asked in interval. Paco looked at me surprised. Salva looked at me shocked. And Sandra looked at Paco as it was the first time she realized he was there. Paco didn't know what to say. I neither gave him time. I answered my own question saying he would, and in that precise moment I decided it was about time we took action. Let's go, I said. Now, Paco asked. Now, Salva asked. Now, Sandra asked. Paco asked it because he hadn't time to warn Ramon. Salva because he hadn't time to go home for the equipment. And Sandra asked it because there still was the last hour of no glamour nor heart left. No, when the show ends, I said, pointing at the telly. Sandra breathed with relief. Salva made as if to get up, but I told him I was going down alone. He had to be on watch at the surface with Sandra and Paco. I included Paco because I thought he was a decent person. Not the kind of decent person that's so grateful for including him in the group that doesn't give you a stab in the back. No, that kind which is decent, but you have to keep an eye on just in case he feels like being loyal to his friends. Paco got up and went to look out of the window. The reflection let me see he had the cell phone on his hand. It wasn't that important. If he was talking to Ramon, supposing he had left the Venus, he would be wasted enough not to come underwater in the early morning. The last time after commercials didn't bring too many surprises. A porno actress and a variety great name. It could be a freaky and an old-fashioned singer, a porno actor and a forgotten widow. The credits hadn't finished yet when I told them to go, because that was why I was in charge for. Sandra came without questions. I think to forgot, because the undercover of darkness had never appealed to her. Paco came because Sandra did, and because he had agreed something with the others, or that was what I suspected. And Salva to see how it all ended. He didn't have anything to lose. On the way, Paco didn't do anything more than ask where we were, with more and more frightened voice. It was understandable because the city at night was pitch dark. At the zero zone, I mean. There only were a few lines we could recover. We connected them to the electric mains, without permission, of course. Even though we could almost walk without seeing. Anyway, that night there was a full moon. Yes, that was the reason why I had taken the plunge so impetuously. We had to go to my place first to pick my wetsuit up. The water is still colder at night and it's not very advisable got into without it. As we were walking down the Finisterre Avenue, the darkness was more obvious and Paco appeared hugging Sandra without wanting to. Maybe, unconsciously, he did. But Sandra took it in the innocent side. In that moment, she saw him like that, like an innocent being stating out in the night world, in the real one, not in that of neon signs that confuse. The tide was high. It reached the Hilton door. I told them to wait for me there. I had to pick the boat up, one of those boats we didn't have because one council's regulation declared them illegal on the zero zone. Each one had its hiding place and nobody knew the others, more as a precaution than distrust. I hid mine in the Cine Paris building. It was at the very center. Nobody could get there without a boat. They had to swim for a while and knew how to do it. The rubble made the bed more dangerous than the quicksands. It was a small building that withstood very well the sea attacks, It had upper floors where I could keep the cylinders and some other thing in case of emergency. The city was in silence. I supposed they were fishing, but the real fish, the one you eat. With the full moon in summer, the most took advantage of that for fishing or having parties. Tourists liked the clandestinely, and they spent lots of money, even though it wasn't a known thing. Not only because the police could turn up, but because the legal businesses got very serious when they took too much clients away. It was not the case. There couldn't be too many people with the high tide. Anyway, there wasn't too much activity. I started the boat. I got a bit worried seeing there were only 3 full drums left. If the thing took long, we would have to row. I took them by surprise. Luckily for Paco, he was grabbing Sandra's arm. Salva was talking on the phone. Paco looked backwards very often while Sandra and Salva got into the boat. He seemed to have doubts, but he also got into. Afterwards, when he saw himself among the rubble and the building's shadows with its bare columns and the windows into pieces were the only scenery, his face became the face we all had the first time we saw that landscape, between trimmed and moved. I remember I felt some kind of respect for those buildings that refused to give the place back to the sea, that stood there to be seen. The Universal Savings Bank building was easy to find. It had on the roof a silver metal globe that shined with the moon like a retro disco crystal ball. We went inside up to the stairs. I stopped the engine. Salva got down the boat and tied it up to the foot, I mean the leg, of a fake half-stuck naked Roman statue they had as supposed good taste decor at the head office of the famous institution. Paco got down, and Sandra after him to help me with the oxygen cylinders. The glasses had a walkie-talkie to talk to Salva. It rarely happened something, but I neither wanted to die right there. I had brought one spare cylinder, even I hoped not to need it. I heard Paco asking Sandra about the signal. Signal here? Sandra asked without realizing that she was talking with a foreigner. No, there isn't any here. They can't. This is the zero zone. It's not legal. The companies have to leave this area free or they lose their license. Sandra's voice sounded more and more like an echo until I stopped hearing it. The torch was showing me the Universal Savings Bank famous basement, and contrary to what you could think, my heart beat strongly, excited. And what if the legend turned out to be real? The water was cold, and as much as I did my utmost to think there weren't sea monsters or dead bodies with their feet into concrete block, I ended up thinking about it. Even though I went ahead, I went down. The staircase winded round in the depth, but it appeared before me an exquisitely decorated landing that led to a room so spectacular that it seemed to me worthy of attention. I figured out it was the strong room waiting room because it was antique, classy, and suitable to make rich people feel comfortable living there all their dubious origin wealth. Close to the wall there was an oak table with thick legs and drawers with ivory inlay. Unluckily, I was able to think it didn't fit into the boat because suddenly it became more interesting than the damn treasure legend. Just between the table and the wall there was a chair, also made of solid wood, apparently without damage. As much as I went down, I always was amazed by a scene like that. almost intact, preserved, waiting. It was exciting. It made me feel welcome. I swam all around the room searching for the safe door, but it wasn't there. I began to think the legend was a fraud. I left the sitting room and kept on downstairs. Down it all was concrete. Some fish came to the light. One bit my foot and I almost died instantly. Not by the pain, just by the fright. I don't know how much I went lower down. The pressure gauge was at the middle, but the stairs still went on and there were no more than stairs and fishes. I didn't want to look up because I was regretting it. At last, the going down became wider and the stairs ended in a big room, covered with a bright metal, steel probably. I went round, slowly, expecting to find the safe door, or not, who knows. Sometimes it's better let the legends be legends and prevent the disappointment. I didn't see it. The room was round and continuous. There wasn't the wheel that looks like a rudder I always see in the movies, neither the little one with numbers and lines surrounding it. I had to go round again slower and closer to find out where the door was, because there had to be a door. I couldn't believe that now, that at last I thought the famous legend was true. Now they had convinced me. There wasn't such a thing. I took my right hand glove off to touch the surface. I shouldn't. The skin smell attracted Gaston's little descendants. I had never heard these animals hurt anybody, but when I found any by chance, I was scared shitless seeing those sharp teeth. I went up and down along the wall several times until I found the split. It was just opposite to the staircase. I didn't notice it touching. It was when I moved away and the light reflected into colors. The metal had the shines up in one side and down in the other. At that point, I banged against the wall from one side to another. I wasn't strong enough because the pressure made it hard for me to move. I was determined to find out the way to open the gate, if there was any. I looked side to side again. There had to be a button, or a lever, or something. Of course, it could be opened with a key or a remote. "Come up!" I repeat, "come up!" Salva shouted in my ear. "Come up right now!" "I'm coming, just a moment," I said. "Not a moment! Come up now!" he ordered. I had no chance but doing what he ordered. He seemed serious, but I was living with the feeling of failure and the still room in my mind, checking by heart the entire place. Suddenly I saw it. I saw it clear. It had to be on the handrail somewhere. I went down again. The handrail was a steel bar stuck into the wall, with the gap enough to hold on well. There wasn't any ornament, and when I reached the end, it occurred to me I only had silly thoughts. "Come up, for God's sake!" Salva shouted. I turned round to go up. It got dark, silenced, peaceful. "Where are you?" Salva shouted from far away. "Bloody hell, come up!" I could hear the small water currents dodging the short-sighted architect's whims. "Come up right now!" Salva said, disturbing that moment of peace. "Come up, for heaven's sake!" He seemed desperate. His desperation broke the peace I was feeling. Slowly, I was winning through with the torch. "I'm going down! Something happens!" Salva was speaking desperately. I kept on going up. I didn't understand Salva's exasperation, but I neither realized that I should calm him down. Bloody hell, Sandra! Hurry up with the fuck cylinder! Salva was saying. I could see him already. From below, he looked even more hysterical than on the surface. I laughed. I went out of the water next to the boat. I saw Paco coming urgently and Salva following him with the eyes up to me. His face showed a despair I didn't understand. Maybe something had happened in the meanwhile I was down. They gave me a hand, and I felt that piece of the depth again.
Welcome, Sienna, Xavier Carimbano said. It's a pleasure you are here with us tonight. I sat down. The truth is that I was a bit nervous. The audience was clapping warmly, and the meeting Xavier Carimbano moment was very exciting. I met Charo some months before during a charity dinner Rosalia Cundins had invited me to, and in which she introduced me to her husband. At last! I wasn't in a hurry to meet him, nor I gave my life for that kind of things. But I promised Sandra a picture of the specimen the day I told her I had met Rosalia. I met Aria at Kukita's wedding. She wasn't sat next to me, but at the dancing time, and with the after midnight drinking, she finally greeted everybody, displaying her temperament and charm. My relationship with Arthur and Bismi is a bit more complex. It's not they are a nuisance, but sometimes I'm fed up of having them behind me every day. I have never reached the point of making a scene, nor to them, nor to the girls that are always waiting for me at home, holding their microphones. But sometimes I felt like missing that times I could go out with the sleep in my eyes and the bad temper in my face. When the studio manager told the audience to sit down and the music stopped, I looked at Xavier. He was looking at me with his irresistible smile, and I sort of got a bit horny. But he didn't give me time. He repeated the welcome and told me it was a pleasure and that they were very grateful I was there. The truth is that I went because Sandra would kill me if I declined the invitation. I plenty knew they were going to push me, but Sandra was on and on, saying she didn't see the problem, that they weren't going to take anything out of me, that it was a big amount of money to wash my image, giving it to charity and make a good impression. And after a month, on and on, every day, every hour, every second, she even phoned me when she was with her boyfriend, so much she did that I had to talk to him to see if he could manage to keep her a little more busy. In short, I was scared shitless. A summary video with the last 3 months' news opened the show. Actually, it was there when they started to talk about me, when I began to appear in the media. Before that, they only followed me because I showed up at parties out of the blue and I aroused their curiosity. I think that was my big mistake because I drew too much attention to myself. Accompanied by very handsome boys. And because I drew too much attention to myself accompanied by very handsome and famous boys. And because I drew too much attention to myself accompanied by very handsome and famous boys in well-known and very frequented by lots of celebrities followed by lots of journalists' places. But I didn't do it on purpose. It came out that way. One thing led to another. The hardest part was seeing how they put him into prison. I didn't see it coming, neither did Paco. In fact, It was he who told me the news. However, while I saw him escorted by the ward, I was surprised. I felt sorry for him because it served him right. Aria probably noticed it because that was the first thing she dropped. In the meanwhile, we saw the images. I could notice that in certain moment the spectre of guilty showed in your face. Am I right? And why did it disappear instantly? The best way of approaching the issue was with the truth, because only God knew how many aces they had in their sleeves, and I'd rather have them on my side than face up to them. Ramon is an ex-boyfriend. There isn't remorse. We were young, and the truth is that we didn't keep in touch. I heard about his arrest through a mutual friend, and I'm so sorry for him because he is really nice. I lied a bit. The nice thing just meant he didn't commit any felony. He had never assaulted anybody with or without a reason, and he wasn't cruel either, or took advantage of people when they were at a disadvantage. But he really was a pig, and he always had been. The thing is that, deep down, there still were some feelings reminding. I don't like seeing him in that situation, but thinking I have something to do with the crime he is accused of is secondary and without any legal foundation. Aria sniggered. Charo changed her posture and her face, and Bismuth reeked with laughter. Arthur interrupted me, saying that of course there was any legal foundation. In fact, he had received some very reliable information about it. I also argued that until that information was considered suitable by a judge, it hadn't any legal validity and it only were mere speculations. Charo got more upset. Aria asked me for the origin of my fortune because in just 2 years I got a place in the high society and without having sex, in principle, with a celebrity. I clarified with pleasure that I had made some good investments when the economy was growing and I wasn't the only one. Afterwards, I spent time enjoying my fortune because I understood that was the money for. And I was right. I don't have it to rot in a bank. Charo fidgeted. And where did you get the money to make those investments? Charo asked. From an inheritance, I said with an incredible calm. Charo couldn't take it anymore. She appealed to our friendship, to the afternoons at Rosalia's home, and she asked me to be sincere. Did the so inheritance really exist? Because the treasury doesn't know anything about it. I told her that it did exist, although it was not an inheritance in the strict sense of the word. I didn't like talking about it because it came from a person that had received a compensation for the tsunami, and that person didn't actually lose the insured item. And that was the item that person transmitted to me once dead. I wasn't lying. The Universal Savings Bank hadn't declared the treasurer's money. It was their fault. I also said that I did declare that item, and the treasury had never asked me where it came from. And if they hadn't done it, maybe it was because they were more interested in the collecting than in the origin, lawful or not, of my incomes. Chero seemed to calm down. As my answer got to prove my arguments and make her look good with the show. But Bismi had more aces in his sleeve and asked me if that person had favored more people with its generosity because Ramon had claimed something very similar in his defense. I answered that I didn't know about that, but it could be possible because thanks to the tsunami, a lot of the underground economy had come to light and they had to give vent to them. And that so generous person might be a bank senior executive. Bismi asked with sarcasm. I clarified among laughs. It wasn't my situation, and I neither knew any bank senior executive generous in any way. The audience clapped and laughed. The charm conductor smiled. And is it Ramon's? Bismi asked again, also smiling. I repeated that I didn't know the details of his case. And it was true. I couldn't get anybody to tell me how Ramon had appeared under arrest accused of stealing the Universal Savings Bank's secret treasure. I didn't understand how the bank was able to report him, and how Ramon was able to accuse himself or let them accuse him. I wasn't in touch with Alberto, and Salva was traveling around the world. And since he had changed his place of living to the Caribbean, we only talked about his travels and the inner peace. It was like a tacit pact. We didn't talk about that day again. Sandra was the most discreet of all. She kept on living as she used to, and she seemed to enjoy more Salva's and my adventures than the money she had. She was happy, and that's that. But there are evidence that you two were involved at that time, Arthur said. If there are evidence, they will call me to testify soon. For the time being, they mustn't have them as clear as you. There are also evidence you worked recovering submerged things after the tsunami, Arthur said. No, I don't believe there are. Maybe there are some gossips. There are a lot of gossips of many people. And even so, recovering doesn't imply any crime. I don't see you refuse adamantly the accusations my colleague is doing, Aria said. Is there a reason? And there, the thing got harder, because I got nervous, because they noticed it, and because they started to bring out the statements. What's up? Nothing, it's all right, she fainted. Let her take a breath. It's all right. Is she dead? What are you saying? Are you nuts? Feeling at dry land, I took a breath and woke up from the dream. Paco was walking hysterical from side to side. Sandra was next to me and Salva was checking the equipment. After a few minutes, I felt refreshed, completely clear-headed, as I had woken up from a good nap. Salva was tense. I could notice in his face he was torn between the relief of me being well and the keen to knock my face out because I hadn't gone up when he told me to. Sandra was not bothered at all, as she plenty knew nothing bad was going to happen. I appreciated it because I was so relaxed and I didn't understand Salva's hysteria. Paco's reaction was despicable. Sandra told me he was electric, trying to find an explanation to be involved in a death. As they two calmed down, Sandra asked me what I had found down there, if I had seen the famous strong room, if I got to open it. Do you see the what? Salva said hysteric again. Sandra looked at him badly and told him to calm down once and for all, because he looked like an hysterical old man. Her exact words. Salva shut up because he knew Sandra only talked like that, arriving the starting point of the anger. I told them what I had seen, and as I hadn't seen much of the safe, I took pleasure in the perfect table and chair thing, until Salva sighed with too much energy, and I decided it was time to get to the point. I described the best I could what I had seen at the last floor, and I saw the disappointment in their faces. Paco asked me if I was sure about not finding a button. Salva's theory was it opened with a card, that there had to be any keypad somewhere. Sandra, that surprisingly was very involved in the story, said that once she attended to a lecture series at the Universal Savings Bank about the nowadays television, the days when the lectures took place, of course. And she saw how the staff only had to put a card next to the door to go in. She said the next to the door thing had nothing special, but the door opened. They said it was a smart building. Although the two hysterics laughed at her, for me, as I had seen the scene done there, it seemed to be the most reasonable explanation. Paco suggested I could go down again because there still was an oxygen cylinder left. Both Salva and I looked at him badly. How easy it was to say, "Go down again." These unirrigated people think this is like having a bath on a Sunday afternoon. I carried them to the water's edge. The tide was lowering. Then I went to take over the equipment and went back swimming. When I arrived next to them, the day was dawning and Alberto and Ramon had come to welcome us. They had alcohol and smoke faces, but they were very serious. Nobody was talking. I didn't say hello to them. I supposed Paco had found them as soon as he set foot on land and got signal. Ramon stared, waiting for me to say something. He seemed annoyed because I wasn't surprised he was there. Or maybe he was annoyed because I was there without telling him. Anyway, he didn't say a word, and I didn't say anything either. I took the wetsuit off, collected my things, and told Sandra and Salva to go. In the way home, we didn't talk. We were tired. It was almost 6 in the morning. It was getting time to go to bed. It was around noon, and I only got up because I had just charged the cell phone and the battery was full. It was Ramon. He asked me if he could come home. I told him not to. I preferred we met at the Central Shops bar. I told him we would meet in half an hour, but I took it easy because the tide didn't lower until the afternoon, so we couldn't cross at least until 2 p.m. Maybe I should clarify it to him, but it was his fault he found me at such hours. I was surprised he was still there. He didn't seem angry, or he was pretending to take me by surprise, or he was pretending because he thought I teased him and he didn't want me to realize I had caught him in the trap. I didn't ask because he had a very bad temper, and it wasn't that interesting to provoke him. What does it exactly mean there wasn't a door? He dropped before I sat down. Well, no, there wasn't, I answered. He took a breath deep enough to fill up with patience and knocked at the table. What the hell was there then? When I explained to him what I had saw, he said I was wrong. That wasn't the basement. There had to be other entrance. That I had to go down again and do the job well once and for all. It surprised me, not only his forceful spirits, but also the fact he was telling me. He noticed it and said, not at all bothered, that Paco had told him we already knew, that we knew everything. Then what for he was going on with the pretending, and that, by the way, he had a great time at the Venus, and that he hoped I had it too. What a hiding he deserved! I took him as an example, and I shut up like a bitch, or better, like a song of one. I didn't tell him Sandra's theory, the one I thought it was the right one, and played along with the going down again thing, but I made it clear that, as sad as it sounded, I couldn't do it until the next month, when I would be paid, because I was broke and I had no money for another oxygen cylinder. He took the wallet and gave me money quick as a flash. I didn't need it. I could get as many cylinders as I needed, and almost for free. But I wanted to have my own treasure just in case there wasn't such safe. And while I was keeping the money, I thought if an abandoned and half-flooded smart building would be still smart.
And if it's still smart, where could we get a card? And if we manage to get a card, could it be still good for the old head office? Or could have the codes changed? Is it enough? Ramon asked quite loud. Excuse me, I replied. I'm asking you if the money is enough. Ramon repeated. You were in trance. I don't know if it's too much or too few. I told him that it was enough by then. Suddenly, I felt embarrassed taking his money, and I was about to give it back to him. But the money didn't want to come out of my wallet, so I got up with my remorse and left. Ramon came behind me and asked if something was wrong. He said I seemed distant. He asked if I was fine and he apologized for yelling at me. He hadn't slept much and was a bit irritable. I just was thinking about the card thing, and I didn't notice his regret, so I couldn't take advantage of him, not asking for money like with the oxygen, but emotionally. I suppose he left on his own. I was too busy with the artificial intelligence issue. I called Sandra to ask her when the next lecture at the Universal Savings Bank was taking place. She was astonished. She would never expect such a question. She answered as I suspected. She hadn't the slightest idea, but we could go up to there and find it out. Alicia looked at Carlos with mistrust. She thought he had been absent-minded for several days, and, above all, too much concerned for his father's business. She didn't know much about the council's things, just a few things her mother told her. But social services weren't much of her interest. There were no more than problems, too much stress. Her father only talked about housing estates, sidewalks, and things like that. Carlos had been, at first, an oasis, but she was more and more certain that what her cow friends were always saying about Carlos being with her out of self-interest was true. She, deep down, knew it easily could be. He had always been very ambitious, but nice, or handsome at least. She actually had thought about it in the morning, at breakfast. She was going to put an end to that situation and talk openly with her husband. She would ask the question, "What is happening to us?" And she would wait patiently for his face trying to show he had no idea what she was talking about. He would tell her that it all was her imagination and that his life could be meaningless without her. She also suspected he would appear the following day with a bunch of roses, red, without thorns, and he could apologize for neglecting her, for assuming lots of things, and he could spoil her like the first time. But she didn't dare. She was only capable of talking about the weather. But daring or not ask the question, she wasn't going to let that grief last not a second more. And it was there, while she was putting the dishes into the dishwasher, where she decided to take steps. When he said goodbye to go to the office, she followed him. But her tiptoes heels made too much noise and Carlos caught her red-handed. She was able to pretend in time she was going shopping and Carlos didn't erase any snack. It was what she used to. That clearly showed Alicia that following her husband wasn't a job for her. If she had to choose between wear the latest fashions and know the truth about what she suspected about her husband, she had right in front of her a dilemma with a difficult solution. So she decided to call that ex-boyfriend with whom she had shared so many good moments, and with whom she had shared so many sordid moments to tell her cow friends. Yes, she was thinking about phoning Andres. She really wasn't thinking about it. She thought about it in the way home to swap the heels for the trainers she had to play tennis at the club. She called him from home. She couldn't help some kind of teenager's excitement while the waiting tone sounded. She also imagined a scorching scene over the office desk coming from Andres' attempt of consoling her before her husband's infidelity. "What's up, man? So, are you enjoying the family life?" Andres said with confidence. Alicia stood paralyzed, not knowing what to say. "Listen!" Andres shouted. "Hey!" Alicia's heart beat strongly. Like the first time she went into her parents' bedroom looking for condoms. He got cordless and the remote mixed up again. "I'm hanging up. Are you listening?" Andres shouted again. "Fuck you off." Alicia didn't know whether to kill her father or let him live to see how she divorced the lawyer he liked so much to marry the, how did he call him, professional crook and unexpected gigolo. If she wasn't so posh, and if she wasn't looking at herself in the mirror, she could swear something like, "Son of a bitch." His father kept in touch with the swine that had tried to make his daughter lose the virginity. That was all a father had to know. With the swine that had testified at the divorce trial, his wife was a tart. It didn't matter. As Scarlett said, she could think about it tomorrow. She took the phone and dialed again. She dialed with a steady hand. She left apart the rich kid's indecisions. "What now? Come on. Haven't you thought what you wanted yet?" Andres asked. "If your ex catches you using her phone, she's going to kick your ass." "Yes, I already know what I want," Alicia answered with a voice from beyond the grave. Andres didn't answer. Alicia could hear how he moved suddenly, like sitting up. "I didn't expect you to shout with joy when you heard my voice, but neither did silence." Alicia said with sarcasm. After a few seconds, Alicia spoke again, this time with a demanding voice. She asked him for an at-once answer, and to be inexperienced, it worked, because Andres stuttered some words she didn't understand, but that made it clear to her he was sorted out and at her mercy. For a few seconds more, she thought how her life would be if she had sorted him out then, instead of letting her father take care of it. She wondered if he would be still so handsome, if her heart still would jump like before, seeing him. But again, the Scarlet's wise advice came to her mind. Let's think about it later. She told him she needed his help to do a little job. Andres tried to refuse to do it, but she didn't pay attention and insisted until he agreed to meet her. As soon as she hung up, he was panic-stricken. If the counselor found out he was involved with his daughter again, he was going to be really pissed off. But if Alicia let the cat out of the bag with the counselor's wife, the situation couldn't be better. She could report him for perjury, and all the trials he had been false witness in would be questioned and who knows if overturned. Weighing his options up, got calm, and decided he had done the right thing accepting Alicia's invitation. He looked back and recalled himself frolicked with a young and exciting Alicia. After all, the decision was quite right, he thought, chuckling. They agreed to meet at a cafe in Oburgo, one they knew well from their youngsters' times. Andres was already sat at the table when she arrived, although she was on time. Alicia thought he was under her thumb, but she preferred not being overconfident because she knew where the overconfidence with that petty heartthrob led to. Andres got up, seeing her approaching. He did it out of respect, as a sign of admiration, and he did it in the whole sense of the word. He had been there for half an hour looking attentively at every over 30 women that came in through the door. He was working out if she had aged badly, if she had put on weight, if she had stopped having her hair dyed, if she had it cut in housewife style. But when he saw her going in with that top model parade, that diva presence, that everything, he remained astonished. From head to foot, he all. The motherfucker is so gorgeous, he thought to himself, pretending he was slobbing all he could pretend. Alicia didn't realize how pleased Andres was with her presence, and she was very perceptive at that, especially since she had her first grey hair. She wondered again and again if she still kept her charm. And when a man looked at her just a bit, she analyzed him to know if he did it with admiration or just not to bump into her. In her defense, she said most of the times was with admiration. But this time she was too busy looking at Andres. No, he wasn't as handsome as she remembered. In fact, in a first look, she felt condemnation to herself for laying naked next to him. Andres had de-aged. Actually, there hadn't been more than a few years of the excess. Too much alcohol, too much cigarettes, too much parties. But as She sat down, and he looked at her with that heartthrob eyes. She found a George Clooney charm worse than the petty heartthrob one. It was the waiter's intervention which made the mutual admirations take a break, and Alicia listened scarlet in the ear again, saying, "Let it go by now and go to the point." Andres was listening not to a single word she was saying. He went from recalling the funny evenings to imagine the nights of wild passion. And when Alicia asked him when he was going to start, he answered immediately. He said without knowing to what he was answering, of course. And it was after finishing the coffee, when he woke up, that he asked what she wanted exactly. Alicia then looked at him directly, and yes, at last, she realized Andres' liu look. She smiled to her inner, said to herself, "You are going to get what for." Patiently, she explained she wanted him to follow her husband, Carlos, because she suspected he was cheating on her, and she gave him a picture, his job address, and some other detail. Andres took the picture and saw a pretty-faced guy with rich kid look, snooty, and above all, not completely stranger. He tried to remember, but he couldn't place him, and as it was more entertaining keeping on checking Alicia, he preferred thinking he maybe had seen him with the counselor once. Alicia said goodbye to him with coldness, to screw him. Now she knew she still had her charm, was going to make him pay it dearly. Andres gazed at her while she was leaving the cafe. "She's gorgeous," Andres thought again. "There isn't any lecture scheduled this month," the uniformed know-all girl said. Sandra turned round to leave, and I was walking after her when I saw at the gift shop a lovely poster of a painting I had in my hands by chance time ago. It attracted my attention, and I went to see how much it cost. The original didn't seem too much to me, but I was sure it cost a lot. I was going to do a rule of 3 with the poster's price, even though it wasn't a very exact sum really. Sandra came after me without interest. The abstract art wasn't much of her like. While we were checking the prices, my ear overheard a conversation between the shop assistant and one of the hostesses. It wasn't that interesting either. They were talking about a dinner they should have the night before, and they were laughing at one of their colleagues who apparently had got up with someone not very refined at the karaoke. They had recorded it all with the cell, and the song sounded quite dreadful. The best thing was that while I was looking from the corner of my eye to see the Crazy Nights video, I rested my subtle attention over one strap they both had hanging from their necks, and that ended in a card. Card, the magic word. We didn't have to wait until the next lecture. There were 2 cards. What is more, in a moment I had to straighten on the side to pretend because they realized there was a shadow staring at them. I drew the conclusion through the glass that all the uniformed people had one. "The card you saw was like those?" I asked Sandra in low voice. "Like which?" Sandra answered, also in low. "Like the ones they all had hanging from their necks," I said. Sandra looked around without focusing, as she was seeing nothing they say at the never-ending story. What the fuck? They were no more than people with cards hanging from their necks, and the girl didn't take notice. I had to give her a nudge and point with my finger to one guy at the corridor on the other side of the glass. And that, since he noticed the move, looked at us with blue eyes actor's face. And there I was quick thinking. Yes, it's not cool, I say it, but I was bloody quick thinking. In short, I was quick thinking, and I got half horny as he really was a blue eyes actor, and as he was really hot, which he was. Even under other circumstances, I didn't let him believe it so easily. Sandra stood apart, leaving each to their own, because I had told her I had met Ramon that afternoon, and that, after all, I still liked him. She, being as she was, could be hoping I made my mind once and for all. After a pair of looks and a call on the receiver, the guy left. I followed him with the look to see where he was going to, but I lost him. We were going out of the gift shop to think it carefully when the security guard intercepted us. Was it so easy to find out we were up to something? "He's calling you," Watt said, pointing behind me. I turned round. He was the gorgeous in his uniform, with his blue eyes arched a smile, waving me to wait for him. I waited, of course I did. I would wait for a man like that the time he needed. You'll say I'm exaggerating, but if you had seen him walking in slow motion along that polished marble corridor, you would understand. He took us to have something at the cafe. So natural he was, I can say he was lucky he could work in a company that let him go to the cafe to hook up during the working hours. All the way, like with the security guard, I thought they had caught me. But he was talking so relaxed that or he was so good at pretending or he really believed I kissed the floor he treated. No, his beauty didn't reach that point. We had a drink. Sandra was in a world of her own. When she's not interested, she's not interested, and that's that. I suppose she was dealing with one of her transcendental doubts. Anyway, it was one of her virtues. She never complained with the "what a boredom" or sighed exaggerating, nor she showed annoyance. She was just in a world of her own. The handsome told me how stressing his job was, and that he had stolen so valuable time to his boss to have a drink with me, because he was brave and risky like that. Because he didn't care about his boss, even though he looked nervously over my shoulder every 2 minutes. He also told me the super complicated it was to organize an exhibition and how demanding the artists were. I agreed with him that most of them were big fever. He was bugging me so much that I worked out I would have to get him drunk just to take his card. Luckily, 2 girls passed by and pointed at the clock. It was what saved me. He smiled with relief and made antics to the girls, and they danced the Pulp Fiction thing. I started to think the guy in the video of the gift shop was the blue eyes actor's face. But also luckily, while I was thinking this, I took the card. So fast I was that not even Sandra left her trance. And the best, not even the blue eyes actor's face realized. He was immersed in the dance thing, and in seconds more uniformed people arrived and joined the musical. I woke Sandra up with a nudge. She already warned me I had her arm stewed. And we slipped away among the dancers as we could. At the door, we began to run as if 4 tax inspectors and 2 of the labor department were chasing us. We didn't stop running. Halfway, I shouted Sandra to look for Salva because we were going to try it again right then. Just then. We took different ways while we kept on running. I went to the sea, but I didn't realize that we were in daylight until I arrived at the water's edge. I didn't care, looked around unceremoniously, and jumped into the water. It was cold. I should thought I wasn't wearing the wetsuit at the water's edge. And no, I realized when I was soaked and frozen. But the classic, in for a penny, in for a pound, was quite right. Salva called me hysterical. Don't you dare to start without me. Of course I was about to dare. But once I had told Sandra to bring him, the right thing was waiting, or better, shut up. I was waiting for them behind a building. I didn't want to risk someone passed by and began to ask questions. They didn't take long. Sandra was excited as when we left the Universal Savings Bank. With that life, it gave playing little pranks. Salva brought all the equipment. He remembered to bring a wetsuit for me. I thanked him not very warmly. I was frozen stiff. They got into the boat and we went to the old San Andres Street. It went faster this time. We knew where things were. They waited at the surface and I went down without doubt. To the bottom. Faster, faster. I carried the cart so grabbed they couldn't take it out of me, not even dissecting me with laser. Once down, I started to pass the cart all over the wall. I didn't leave any piece without touching, and apparently nothing happened. The deception made me take it easy. Think better what I was doing. The cart possibly didn't belong to the same system, so I couldn't pass it all around so hastily. The wall might be very sensitive, but I also should have to give it time. It had been long without having a cart so close, or maybe it needed its time to start. So I resumed Sandra's idea and imagined where the door could be. I worked out it in some way should open opposite to the stairs. It fitted best. They weren't going to make rich people go in under the stairs. I looked backwards and worked the stair center out. I went up to the ceiling, even though it was obvious it couldn't be there, because or there wasn't gravity or the ridges were quite tall. But I didn't want to leave nothing behind either. I went down to a reasonable height, but nothing happened. Afterwards, I went to the right and looked up and down up to 1.90 m, more or less, step by step, slowly, and the calm bore fruits. I didn't realize at first it was a blue light that mixed with the fish's eyes little flashes reflecting the torchlight. But I passed again. I don't know, a sixth sense maybe. The second time the flash was more intense. It didn't go unnoticed, but the door didn't open. Even though it was clear that was the right place because I went a bit further up and it didn't react. I called Salva to ask for his opinion. He sighed with desperation. Sandra, over Salva's voice, said that in the movies there always were two keys, one for the bank and another for the customer. What a mess! Salva said, angry. Then he sighed again and told me to try a bit more in the same place. Maybe it was slow because of the inactivity. It was funny, we two thought the same. What a couple of bitches we were! And I tried again. I spent there 20 minutes and suddenly I thought I was going to die. The first thing I noticed was a strong vibration. I was talking to Salva through the walkie-talkie and upstairs they didn't feel anything, so I supposed it wasn't a tremor. I went back to that idea later, when the noise was so deafening I couldn't hear Salva. Nothing on the wall. After a few seconds, the noise was even more deafening and the wall began to vibrate, not much, just like a cell phone or less perhaps. And the sesame opened, at last, letting me see for a moment a spectacular chamber, intact, until the water started to cloud that thin piece. When it completely opened, I went in. Not without fear. If it closed it, nobody could get me out of there. But the treasure was calling me, and I couldn't help it. Inside, there was a table like the one at the upper sitting room, impeccable, only moved from its place by the water avalanche. The chair got stuck too. On the wall, there were little boxes with little security locks, with little keys to open them. I didn't have. On one side, there was a narrow corridor that led to another room a bit smaller and grottier than the previous. There was the classic strong room at last, with its weird, rather style. The excitement didn't let me talk. Salva was shouting, thinking I had fainted again. And I wasn't able to tell him that, at the end, the treasure was real. For God's sake, it was real! Yes, it was too much to say. At that moment, I only could confirm the treasure safe existed. I swung as fast as I could to go up. When I arrived, I took out the oxygen mask and shouted like crazy. It opened! The strong room exists! It opened! It opened! Sandra and Salva jumped for joy and asked me to tell them all, everything and all. We were overcome with emotion. Who gave a damn about the money? That was a magic moment. After a long while of laughing, jumping, and dreaming about what we were doing with the money, I changed my cylinder and Salva gave me a packet of explosive. Slowly and with a scared face. I'll be careful, I said. Sandra looked at him, saying not to suffocate me. It was going to be okay. Actually, I understood him. We didn't know how much the foundations could withstand. They had been badly treated, maybe too much. Before going down, Salva checked there was oxygen enough for the operation, or as he said, to have time to go up. I went down again, and as I was going into the chamber, I couldn't help feeling a 12th night strong emotion I almost had forgotten. The structure seemed solid. The thickness of the steel walls was so tremendous I even thought the explosive wasn't enough, and because of that, I took my time to find the right place. The truth is that I had never faced a strong room like that. I wish. But in my innocence, I imagined it would be the same as others I had the honor of meeting in some occasion, only a bit bigger. Without a doubt, and while I was thinking about it, I realized I was wrong. But I had to start somewhere. I decided to use only half the charge. Other mistake of mine, even though I hoped to be right with the position of the charge, and if the power wasn't enough, I could end it with the rest. The error of judgment was in the obvious possibility that I was wrong placing the charge. I handled the explosive carefully, and even more carefully I placed the detonator. I went to the stairs to press the button, up to the next floor, to run away if it was necessary. The idea of ending buried down there was terrifying. I warned Sandra and Salva to take cover just in case, because I was going to press the button. I took a deep breath and I pressed. I didn't hear the explosion, the water just swept me away. I mean, it sucked me, and for a few minutes I lost control of everything. I felt the nightmare fear of that day I was learning to swim in the very water's edge of San Amaro's beach, and a wave knocked me down. What? Weren't there waves in San Amaro's beach? Well, fine, the wave wasn't that big, but I was little, and it shocked me. I crashed against everything. The metallic noise I heard from time to time terrified me even more because I had never seen a cylinder break, but it could be easier than it seemed. Inside, the bubbles were going up, flying away through my unsteady arms. An imprecise time gap later, the bubbles disappeared. The turbulence calmed down, and the water was clear again. And at last, I could see the treasure chamber's contents. What is there? What is there? Salva repeated insistently. There were lots of briefcases, like the metallic ones in the spy movies, piled up as the little security boxes from outside. In fact, if some of them hadn't moved, I couldn't feel the difference. I took one. They all had a combination and a little lock. We weren't so lucky to have the numbers or the keys, so I tried to break it. And as the water didn't let me try hard, I took a pair of them and went up. Salva took the cases out of my hands, not to help me to get out of the water, but to see what they had inside. He started to beat them before Sandra's appalled look. I still was into the water, and Salva looked more and more like one of the 2001 A Space Odyssey gorillas. When Sandra got fed up with listening to wild Salva's hits, she took one of the briefcases. She forced it open with an iron bar she found around there and opened it. And we opened our eyes. I can say with no doubt I had never seen so many 50 euros notes together. Never! No, I would see them again. Salva took that briefcase and gave her the other to be magic again. And so she was. She opened it with a simple maneuver. And we saw another amount of notes. How many did you say there were? Salva asked, throwing up his hands in horror. A lot! There are a lot! I said, desperate. Yes, desperate. How could there be so many money in the world and we live with so few? All of this said, seeing only 2 cases. What are we doing? Sandra asked. Take them all, Salva and I said at a time. It was as we read our minds. Don't leave not even one. That was our goal. We were going to have big difficulties taking away that huge lot of money from there without arousing suspicions or attract busybody looks. In that point, we invested a bit time more to think the strategy. And in that point too, Sandra stopped being so helpful as before, because she began to say things like, we can use a helicopter, Sandra. Or maybe a balloon, Sandra. Well then, this thing that looks like a down jacket with 2 ropes, she said, meaning the paraglider. She kept on for a while giving such helpful ideas like that. In the meanwhile, Salva and I were thinking about a mixed animal strategy, something in between a snail strategy and a Trojan's horse one. Thinking with the agility that characterized me, and knowing they were there for a reason, I assumed the 2 oak tables in the respective rooms idea. The biggest trouble was the damp treatment. They didn't float. I could see it clear, and I got surprised. On the pro side, they were so beautiful. I didn't convince Salva. He showed me with his face he could put up with it if there wasn't other option. Of course there were more options. There were office fittings enough. But apart from getting a telling off from the scrap guys, It was going to be difficult to justify in front of Ramon the reason why we had came back to pick up some filing cabinets. Oh, haven't I told you yet? We agreed not to tell them anything, not a single word. If the treasure issue came out again, I could tell him I had gone down once more. And I wasn't able to open the strong room, supposing there was something, which of course I had just told him it was only a silly lie for tourists. Carme was looking at her daughter having breakfast. She thought she was acting weird, but it neither seemed that important. Sometimes she had that mystic faces. She thought she maybe had put too much pressure on her to be a good woman, and had ended up bearing some intellectual vocation of the kid. It wasn't the case. Alicia was thinking around the idea of telling her mother the Andres thing. She obviously didn't realize Carlos was sitting at the same table, and thank goodness he drew attention to himself, because Alicia had just found the exact words to express it, preventing her mother had a fit. Carlos also noticed the distance Alicia kept with him on those days, but he didn't pay too much attention because he had Sandra in his head. He had never thought about cheating on his wife, more for fear of his father-in-law than for love. He loved her. He couldn't say the contrary, nobody could. But it wasn't a captivating passion of those they say you feel when you are truly in love. We must say, also, he had never felt that passion for nobody in his life. For nobody until he met Sandra. Alicia stood alone at the kitchen and enjoyed the peace remaining in between they left and the cleaning lady came. She thought. She thought again. No, better don't. She was thinking about calling Andres, but in the end she decided it wasn't the best idea. It was he who had to phone. Yes, that was the best. She always rushed, and if Andres noticed it, he would have the control of the situation back. And her plan to make him suffer would fall through. Andres wasn't going to call her, at least for a while. He didn't have anything to tell her. When he realized Carlos was Salva's lawyer, he preferred to let it slip by until the trial passed. He was smart enough not to force the situation. He got to pass the buck to Salva. If Carlos was good, he could get him out easily, and they all would be free at the end, safe and sound. But if he got too close, and the so-called Carlos realized, maybe he could claim that motivation and give the mess back to him. So, 2 or 3 weeks passed by, what seemed too long to Alicia. The uncertainty for the Carlos' weird behavior, the emotion of having a reason to leave him, and live an exciting life with Andres for a few months, and then other men, and then she received a phone call from Andres. Her heart beat fast. When do we meet? Andres asked with tired voice. Alicia wanted to say, I can't tomorrow. And it went out, whenever you want. She spent the whole day revising the phrase to get into her head. It didn't sound too anxious. The truth is that she got it. The get into her head thing, because to tell more truth, she actually sounded anxious. And what was worse for her, Andres noticed it. Although the poor devil luckily was thinking about other things and supposed the longing was owed to know about her husband, not about him. They met at the same cafe of the last time. It seemed the most practical to Andres. It seemed the most romantic to her, as it was their secret place. It wasn't secret or anything, but imagination was like that. Andres put together the pictures he took to Carlos. They were unimportant. They really were innocent. But he took too much trouble to show a secret in Salva's ear looked like a snogging with Sandra, I would say, following the school of the tomate. Alicia arrived late. Calm down. Divine, to be more precise. Andres was worried. He was afraid Alicia didn't keep on paying him. He was afraid the setup was too good and she was just happy with that. It wasn't the usual. With that bite, all women wanted to know more. Why? What does she have? What does she give him? All those silly things Andres listened all over again. It was what he ate off. If someone cheated on him, he could resolve it with the suitcases out of the door. But women and our transcendental depths were a lot more profitable. Alicia took the photos with her 2 hands. She looked at them. She had that look Andres knew as abandoned woman syndrome. Harry knocked more or less 5 minutes before she started to cry her eyes out. He was wrong, as with everything in this new Alicia. Is this all you have? Alicia asked with demand. All, Andres said, trying to find a fast excuse. It wasn't very helpful. It seems Alicia also followed, as I did, the school of the tomate and could recognize a setup as soon as she saw it. Andres began to get nervous, and it made him got angry, and as a result, getting even more nervous. Alicia rested on the back of her seat and looked at him with distance. She was seeking that George Clooney charm she had seen in the last date. But she couldn't find it. It is something, Andres said at last. Yes, this can be everything. By the shadows you can tell there were 2 more people, Alicia said with confidence. With such confidence, she even believed she knew what she was talking about. Never in her life had stopped to count the shadows of anything. And in that very moment, she reached 3 determinations that would make a difference in her life. First, Carlos wasn't useful, not even to get divorced. Second, Andres wasn't useful, not even to get divorced. Third, she was really worthwhile.